Welcome back. I can't believe we're on part 10 already of our communication series. I'm excited to be joining you again today. I hope that you're all doing well. Today, I want you to stop for just a minute and think about a speaker that you enjoy hearing. Someone that you would say is a good communicator, but also someone that you actually enjoy listening to when they speak. Maybe it's a coworker when they present to your team, or maybe you can even recall a professor or a teacher who could always keep your attention in the classroom. Maybe it's a talk show host, or even the local news anchor or a meteorologist who can keep your attention. Think now, what words would you use to describe this person who can hold your attention? Are they entertaining, energetic, funny? If we had the time, we could probably come up with lots of words or attributes to describe that person. But now, I want you to think about the people you do not connect with, those that you really just don't care to listen to. I would be willing to bet that one word comes to mind: boring. This is the one word that best describes someone who simply doesn't connect with others. You know, every day, everywhere, millions of eyes glaze over in classrooms, in auditoriums, in churches, in meeting rooms, and even living rooms, because the people speaking fail to be interesting. And as a result, they simply don't connect. How many lessons did you sit through in a classroom that you would say you actually remember? How many conversations or how many speeches do you remember? For every one that you do remember, there was probably thousands that you don't. Corporate presentations coach Jerry Weissman once said, "Few human activities are done as often as presentations, and as poorly." One recent estimate has it that 30 million presentations using PowerPoint slides are made every single day. 30 million! I'm sure you've attended your share of those. How many of them were truly memorable, effective, or even persuasive? Probably only a handful. Again, this is another area that you can improve. We can all become more interesting as we speak and as we share with others. John Maxwell said he could recall when he was a young man, still in college, and he took this test that measured his creativity. Well, surprisingly to him at least, his score was at the bottom of the class. At the time, he knew he wanted to be a preacher. And he said, "I refuse to be another boring preacher. We have enough of those already." And that's when he began this discipline many years ago of collecting quotes, stories, even illustrations for his speaking. He just decided, you know what, if I can't be very interesting and I discover that's really not my gift, then at the very least, I am going to share something in my message that is interesting. So no matter how hard you work at connecting with others, you can't always please everyone. John Maxwell said he could remember when he was preaching and preparing for the message the night before, he would often hear his daughter Elizabeth praying, "Dear God, please don't let my dad be so boring tomorrow. Amen." He also overheard his daughter tell her younger brother one Sunday morning to take a lot of toys with you to church this morning because Dad is preaching. John said he often could identify with the pastor who was asked by his daughter why he always prayed before he entered the pulpit. And the pastor said, "Well, honey, I do that to ask God to help me with my sermon." And the little girl was quiet for a while as she thought about this, and then she replied, "Well, Dad, why doesn't he help you then?" I had to laugh when I first heard this story. You know, Ronald Reagan's speechwriter many years ago advised against what is often referred to as the hammock method, which is what so many speakers, including preachers, do. It's called the hammock method for a reason. You see, there's a nice strong tree holding it up at the beginning, and a nice strong tree holding it up at the other end. But then in the middle, there's this soft section that slopes down where we all fall asleep. Listen, you and I just can't afford to do that with our audience if we want to create and maintain a positive connection. So today I'm really excited to share with you how you can be more interesting as you are presenting. I don't care if you're presenting to 2 people, 200 people, or 2,000. If you can learn to do as many of these 7 things as possible, you will be certain to capture your audience and their attention, and you'll become more interesting along the way. Number 1, take responsibility for your listeners. You know, I can recall a few years ago, I was asked to speak at an event locally, and a previous speaker at that same event shared with me that this was a tough audience. She said, "Be prepared." Well, talk about offering encouraging words. Gee, she had me a little rattled. But I decided, I'm just going to share it like I would with any group. And it turned out that they were very welcoming and they were attentive. They were a terrific audience. In fact, we experienced a real connection. It's not uncommon for presenters to talk about a bad audience. I don't believe there's any bad audience, only bad speakers. You see, your first responsibility as a presenter and mine is to gain and keep the audience's attention. You'll have the best chance of success when you know that their attention is your responsibility and yours alone. We've probably all heard the phrase, "You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink." Well, that may be true, but it's also true that you can give him salt and make him thirsty. You see, it's your responsibility to engage the audience and keep them engaged. Too often, I see people who step up in front of an audience and for some crazy reason, they have this expectation that it's the listener's responsibility to get what the speaker's talking about, that they should just get it. Excuse me. This is the wrong approach. Maxwell refers to this as cemetery communication. Lots of people are out there, but nobody is listening. Number 2 is this: communicate in their world. Gosh, we have shared this important skill several times before. Even just the last time I shared with you, the importance of stepping into someone else's world in order to connect with them. But too often speakers are unwilling or they're just unable to get out of their own world and say things from the perspective of their listeners. And not only is this unlikely, you're unlikely to make a connection this way, it is actually likely to create distance between the speaker and the listener. People don't remember what we think is important, but people will remember what they think is important. As a new pastor, John actually said he could remember thinking that his congregation would approach Sunday morning with the same anticipation that he had. However, he quickly realized that, the members of his church were living their lives. They were working and playing sports and running errands and taking care of kids and spending time with friends and family and so on. The reality is the church members were not holding their breath until Sunday morning, wondering what the message might be. John realized that if he really wanted to connect with the members of his church, he would have to meet them in their world, use examples that they would relate to. So if you're selling a new policy or you're talking to a customer who's thinking about canceling, get into their world. Make sure they understand and see the value in what you can offer them. If you're presenting to a group, get into their world so that they will relate. Anything you can do to relate to your listeners and meet them on their terms is going to help you connect. Just always maintain authenticity. You can't pretend to be someone you're not. So you have to be yourself while you're speaking someone else's language. Number 3, capture your audience's attention from the start. From the start. People have these remote controls in their heads today. If you don't catch their interest in a short amount of time, they just click you off like a remote control. Haven't you found that people can really check out quickly when you start talking? I've discovered as a speaker that people will tune in or tune out pretty quickly. And then you have to work so hard to win them back, if you can even win them back at all. Hey, I'm still growing in this area also. I don't always get it right, but I do recognize the need to continue to grow and develop personally in so many areas of our lives, including communicating. It's important that you do everything in your power to make a good first impression and to start well. You'll have a very small window of time to capture your audience's attention. So let me share a few things that you can do to capture their attention from the start. First, you can begin with a comment about the situation or the setting. Experienced communicators know to pay attention to what has already been said and what is taking place around them. And then they can actually use that to their advantage. So the next time you speak, say something maybe based on what everyone has just experienced. And that will just put you on the same page with your audience early on. Another thing you can do is simply introduce yourself. That's a great way to start a presentation. You could even ask for their names. It may create a little chaotic energy in the room, but hey, it can be a great icebreaker too as they're yelling their names back to you. It's just another way that people can let down their guard and feel connected to you. I also encourage you to relax. John Maxwell even sits on a stool to speak. Sometimes I walk around my classroom with a cup of coffee in my hand or a bottle of water nearby. When you just look comfortable, it's more likely that your audience will be comfortable too. Begin with humor. There's another one. Everyone likes a great, funny story. John said he was once the keynote speaker at a banquet that just seemed to go on forever. And so when he finally got up to speak, he opened with this story. At 8,578 words, President William Henry Harrison's inaugural address was the longest ever. He read it on a cold, raw inaugural day, refusing to wear either a hat or a coat. The cold he caught that day turned into pneumonia, and he died a month later. John went on to say, "As a speaker, I have learned a lesson from this bit of history. I will remain dressed, and I promise you my speech will be short." Everyone laughed, and immediately he began a connection. You also want to create a sense of anticipation. Maybe say something like, "I'm eager to add value to your life today." You could even ask them to turn to the person next to them and tell them that you're about to learn something new today. And then number 4, in ways to become more interesting, is to activate your audience. It's easy to speak to an audience of people who are highly energetic and active. And then sometimes people just have a more passive personality, and that's okay. When I speak, I look for signs of engagement or involvement. Is the person taking notes? Are they nodding their head in agreement? You can even look for body language, like are they leaning in as you speak, or are they dozing off? Are there signs of life? Is there a pulse, or are they just asleep? How do you activate your audience? Well, one of the things I like to do is ask questions. And I find that this really helps to increase the energy in the room. It's always a great way to get other people engaged and talking. It could be something as simple as asking what state each person is from, if it's a group of people you don't know who are from different areas. Maybe even making a joke about some of the states, or if you're speaking on the subject of failure, you could ask, "How many of you have ever made a mistake in your life? Please raise your hand." You know, just something to break the ice and get people to chuckle. I also love to ask questions in my classroom pertaining to the subject I'll be teaching. So if I'm teaching on teamwork, I might ask, what has been the biggest obstacle in your workplace that keeps your team from functioning at a high level? And once one person shares, it seems like others will begin to share too. Or I might ask, what has helped your team work well together? It's also great to get people moving. Here's another idea. Get them to stand up or stretch or do some jumping jacks. If you're talking about change, you could even move some of the chairs around at the break and see everyone's reaction when they come back and find that the chairs are rearranged. Or do something as simple as have them clasp their hands together with their fingers intertwined, and then have them clasp their hands again with the opposite thumb on top. It's actually a little awkward if you've ever done that before. It's just a simple demonstration, though, of how sometimes we feel uncomfortable with change. The last tip, as you desire to activate your audience, is to get people to interact with one another. It might be something as simple as introducing themselves to a small group or to the entire group, or it may be a breakout session at the end of a teaching topic. We learned several years ago that our audience doesn't want to just hear us talking for 2 hours straight in a classroom. So now we carve out time at the end of each session to have our small groups come together in our classroom environment to discuss how to apply what they've just learned and how they can apply that in their own workplace. And we always receive terrific feedback from this. The fifth way that you can become more interesting: say it so it sticks. As we think about great communicators over the years, they do have one thing in common. The speaker at some point said something that people remembered long after the talk was finished. Patrick Henry, quote, and I quote, "Give me liberty or give me death." Nathan Hale, "I regret that I have but one life to live for my country." Abraham Lincoln, "A government of the people, by the people, for the people." Winston Churchill, "Never, never, never give up." John F. Kennedy, "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country." And Martin Luther King, "I have a dream." How do you say something so it sticks? Well, link what you say with what people need. Make sure that what you share really does link with the desire that they have. Also, you can find a way to be original. Studies have shown that there is a direct correlation between predictability and impact. So the greater the predictability, the less impact you'll make on your audience. Is it information or is it a transformation? You see, I've heard of people doing magic tricks to kick off a meeting or a presentation. There was once a guy who had to give a boring, lengthy presentation to his class. He was a senior and he was about to graduate. He decided to turn it into a Dr. Seuss rhyme. Not only did he engage the students, he earned a 100 on the project, which was never heard of from this professor. But the professor explained that he gave him a 100 because he had never seen the students so intently listening like they were on this topic. You can also just say things in an interesting way. If you give people information without any thought to the phrasing, you're missing an opportunity to connect and be remembered for what you say. Here's an example. A person must sacrifice to get to the top. We would all agree with that, right? But what if we word it this way? You have to give up to go up. A little different, right? More effective. How about this one? People won't listen until they know you care. Or, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. You see the power in that? Anytime you can say something in a fresh and clever way, people are more likely to listen. Learn to pause. Learn to pause. Connecting with people is a two-way street. It should be a dialogue, not a monologue. So if you're speaking nonstop, people will lose interest. So even if you're presenting to your coworkers, get them involved using some of the suggestions that I have shared with you already. But also don't be afraid to pause. Give your audience time to consider what you have just shared. Give them a chance to catch up with their thoughts, and really it just gives them a break too. So many people are uncomfortable with silence, but it can be used to say, hey, this is important. Think on this for just a minute. Pauses are powerful. Get comfortable with silence and let it become an exclamation point for some of the things that you say. Number 6, we're almost finished here. Number 6 is be visual. And that could be using a PowerPoint presentation or a handout, or maybe even dressing the part of a character to bring a point home. Anything that helps people visually will also help them connect and remember. Using the word imagine can even be a great way to connect with your audience or to help them create this visual in their own mind. So you could say, imagine if you were able to. Imagine how you would feel if. That can be effective as well. And then lastly, number 7, the last way you can be interesting as you engage your audience is to tell stories. You've heard me speak and teach enough now to know that I love sharing stories that apply to whatever topic I might be teaching on. This can be one of the most effective ways to capture people's attention and help them remember what you're sharing. Cold facts rarely connect with people, but good stories can have an incredible impact and can really help even the weakest communicator improve and begin to connect with people. People connect with stories, not statistics. All great communicators use great stories. Did you know that neurologists even say that our brains are programmed much more for stories than for abstract ideas or PowerPoint slides? Stories are our life. We live them, and then we live to tell them. We can use stories to make sense of our own experience, and when we share them, we help people understand us, themselves, and their world too. Even Jesus, throughout Scripture, shared parables or stories so that the disciples and others would clearly understand and relate to his teachings and the point that he wanted to make. So today, you have a choice to make. When you speak, you can be vague, you can be flat, complex, nervous, too formal, stuffy, monotonous, or simply irrelevant. But I encourage you to become a speaker who is warm, honest, friendly, exciting, authentic, confident, inspiring, informal, funny, and interesting. So today I've shared with you 7 tips to help you become more interesting as you speak or share with a group or a large audience. I want to remind you to be the communicator that you would want to hear. The choice is always yours. Our scripture today is Philippians 2:3, which says, "Do nothing from rivalry or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves." Let's always strive to be a leader who desires to serve others and to put others first, even when we are communicating. Thank you for your time. Have a great day.